real estate. Today is our fifth day, and today is the last day. Our privilege, we are having a great personality and senior chartered accountant, as well as non-author, as well as a great speaker, S.S. Gupta sir. Warm welcome. We are having our chairman sir and managing committee members and our respected past chairman sir. So I welcome all the dignitaries of this screen and on this screen. First, I will invite our chairman, sir, C. Sanjay Duggal, sir, to give an opening remark for today's webinar. Sir, over to you, sir.
Yes. Thank you, Abhishek. And a very good evening to all of you. At the outset, I will welcome all the dignitaries on the screen to the fifth day of this GST webinar series on real estate sector. This is the fifth day. It's a concluding day, and we have got a very eminent and good speaker, S.S. Gupta sir, who will be taking us through the session on GST, long-term lease and anti-profiteering. Sir, on behalf of name branch, I welcome you. Also, I recognize the presence of all our past chairmen, CA Samir Gawli sir, CA A.M. Sethi sir, CA Jayant Adhyapak sir, CA Sanjay Nikam sir, who I always tell that he is instrumental for organizing this webinar again and again. He has taken a very painstaking job to take us through this webinar. So a special thanks to CA Sanjay Nikam sir. Also, I welcome all my committee member and all the attendees to this webinar. Friends, this is a great opportunity, and MUBA branch always try to give very good topics to our members. And this is one of the things we have done this time. As yesterday also I mentioned that we'll be taking such a type of webinars on GST on different topics such as FMCG and all other sectors which is covered by GST. And maybe in the coming months or upcoming months we'll be covering all these topics. So friends, I again welcome you all and wish you all a very happy learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanjay sir, for giving insight of branch activity and also future plan of branch. Now I request webinar MOC CA Sanjay Nikam sir, is the past chairman of Navi Mumbai branch also. Sanjay sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Abhishek, and very warm good evening to one and all. Chairman sir Sanjay Bhujbal ji, Vice Chairman Abhishek Shah sir, and dignitary of today's lecture, Sir S.S. Gupta sir, our past chairman Jain Adhyapak sir, and many other dignitaries present on the dais. Very warm good evening to one and all. Friends, this was a very brilliant idea from the branch to organize an industry-wise webinar, and they stood by us and they pulled in the very best brass of the speaker available in Mumbai, or I would say on national level. And this is a very successful event we have organized. And today we have reached to the last point of a milestone of this webinar, this fifth day. And it was a great pleasure to announce here that it was our ambition of our branch to invite Gupta sir to share his experience and knowledge with us. And because of the COVID or whatever reason, I would say the blessing in disguise. So this time, due to technology, we can pull in best of the speaker from all over India to share their experience. And in that drive, S.S. Gupta also is welcomed here, and we are thankful to him that he accepted our invitation in short span of period. Friends, I'll request our past chairman, Jain Adhyapak sir, and he's happened to be a good fan of Gupta sir, because I always saw a great level of admiration for Gupta sir from Jain Adhyapak sir. So I request Adhyapak sir to put across a welcome note for our sir and or to take the event ahead. Adhyapak sir, please take the charge.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, all of you. And it's a great pleasure on my part to welcome Gupta sir and all those who are attending this particular webinar series. Friends, Navi Mumbai branch of WRC of ICAI has organized 5-day webinar series on the topic GST on real estate industry, a comprehensive overview. And the subject was divided in 5 segments, and each segment was addressed by very, very eminent authorities on the subject. And friends, all of you are aware that since last 4 days we have been listening to a very, very eminent staff, and everybody has given full justice to the subject. Today we have with us Mr. S.S. Gupta, chartered accountant, and frankly speaking, he does not need any introduction. All of you are, he's a very, very eminent authority on the subject. And over and above this, I am sure all those who are present here have definitely referred to his book, Service Tax, How to Meet Your Obligation. You will be amazed to note that he had sold 42 editions of this book in the market so far. And presently the book, his book which is selling in the market is GST, How to Meet the Obligation. And of that book as well, 10 editions have been sold in the market. In case of Gupta sir, I am very sure that action speaks louder than words. And Mr. Gupta will be addressing today on anti-profiteering provisions of the GST Act. And he will be also addressing GST on long-term leases. This particular session will be followed by question answer session. And I am sure we will have a very knowledge enriching session. Friends, all of you are aware that section 171 of the CGST Act deals with anti-profiteering provisions. And all of you are aware that whenever there is a reduction in tax or there is a increase in input tax credit, so whatever tax benefit is received is to be passed on to the customers. But there are various issues involved in all these matters, because all of you are aware that on the properties under construction prior to 1/7/2017, the tax rate was 1% VAT and 4.5% service tax. Thereafter, after 1/7/2017, the tax rate under GST increased to 12% with input tax credit. After a lot of hue and cry, the rate is reduced to 8% with ITC on affordable housing. After 1/4/2019, the tax rate for affordable housing was reduced to 1%, and other housing is reduced to 5% without ITC. Friends, in all these scenarios, the tax benefits received by the builders was to be passed on to the customers, and there were various issues involved in all that. Similarly, on long-term leases, all of you are aware that Silco Limited has been charging GST. And all these issues, this GST which is being charged is allowed to be set off against the liability of the builder. But again, there are numerous issues involved in that. So Mr. Gupta would be addressing both these topics. It will be, of course, followed by question answer session. And I am very sure that all of you will have and enjoy this knowledge enriching session. I thank you, Navi Mumbai branch, for giving me opportunity and honor of welcoming Gupta sir. Thank you very much. Over to moderator.
Thank you, Adhyapak sir. It was very nice illustrative keynote, and you have set the ball rolling. I'll request our Vice Chairman, Abhishek Shah, to briefly introduce the today's speaker.
Thank you very much, Sanjay sir. As Adhyapak sir has already mentioned about Gupta sir, many things. सर मैं इतना ही कहना चाहूँगा, मैंने एक फिल्म में एक डायलॉग सुना था जिसमें ये कहा था कि जितनी तेरी उम्र है उतना मेरा तजुर्बा है. तो सर ये आज एप्लीकेबल है. You are a qualified chartered accountant since 1982 and cost accountant as well as company secretary, and you are a rank holder chartered accountant and company secretary. Also, you are a past president. You were past president of Bharat Vikas Parishad, Mumbai. You are currently a managing trustee of Sankalp, that is a charitable trust. You are also treasurer of Mangesh Vishwatha Mandal. You are a chairman of Keshav Shruti located in Bhayandar. You are author of many books like GST Law and Practices, GST How to Meet Your Obligation, GST Audit, written various articles for various newsletter published by ICI and various other organizations. So it's our privilege to invite you for sir. So now I request you to kindly take the charge and start today's session, sir. Over to you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Shri Sanjay Bhujbal. Can I start now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Shri Sanjay Bhujbal, Chairman of the Navi Mumbai branch. Sanjay Nikam, Moderator. Abhishek Shah, Vice Chairman. And Jayant Adhyapak. Thanks for the keynote. And all the participants and friends. The two topic which is today's discussion will take place is on long-term lease and NT profiteering. Both topics are highly disputable issues, let me tell you. And both the topics I will try to cover as much as possible with the all case laws and everything. Now we'll start with the presentation, and I can share the screen, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
See, just to give you a small background, because prior to levy of GST, we had service tax under renting of immovable property. And you all are aware that since 1st June 2007, when the service tax on renting of immovable property was introduced, the constitutional validity of that was challenged. It was argued before the High Courts that the tax on the renting can be imposed only by the state government and not by the central government. And entire matter is before 9-member bench of the Supreme Court. So one can understand how much is the complexity in this. However, the issue was only whether it should be charged by central government or a state government. Now in the GST era, there were powers. State government definitely has a power to charge SGST. Ultimately, assuming it is held in favor of the SSC, the SGST will definitely be chargeable. Whether CGST will be chargeable or not is a question mark. In my opinion, then CGST will not be chargeable. But let us see what finally a 9-member bench decides. I must also tell you one thing. There is a slight difference in the direct and indirect tax dealing. When you plan out anything, in case of direct tax, everything goes from your pocket only. I mean, assuming you have to pay the 20 crore rupees tax, and somehow you have claimed certain deductions and paid 18 crore tax. And 2 crore finally you have paid after a loss at particular state, say tribunal or high court, whatever it is. 2 crore anyway was payable from your pocket, which you have paid with interest when you lost after fighting it out. But in case of indirect tax, it's a cost which you have to build up. Either you can recover from the customer if you are in a business where you can charge, or the credit is available to you, or you can assume that's a cost to you. In the given case, it will be a cost. If the long-term lease it is chargeable, GST is chargeable, it's a cost to you. And therefore, if today you don't recover and build up in the cost, ultimately after 5 years or 7 years, when you lose the matter, and then there'll be a difficulty in recovering from any person. Therefore, you need to be very, very careful when you plan out the indirect tax planning. on this. And this will be always advised that one has to be slightly more conservative. If you feel that you have a chances of more than 50% or 40% of losing, better to commercially protect yourself and then do it. Now, what is the problem in long-term lease is we need to understand and how this problem has arisen in the stages. Nature of lease premium. Now, if you look at the section 7 of the GST Act, which defines a supply, you will find that lease is separately mentioned. You know, it says includes all form of supply, including various items and lease. The lease is separately mentioned therein. Similarly, in Schedule 2, which specifies the Schedule 2 of the GST Act, which specify whether activity is a service or goods, it clearly says in case of land and building that lease is a service. Therefore, lease rent is definitely a service, and the question of charging the GST on the lease rent is well decided. But however, when you take a lease for a long term, which is what our topic is, when you take a lease for a long term, say 99 years or 930, more than 90 years or more than 100 years, and then the question comes whether the premium paid by you is liable for service tax or not, or GST or not. Whether the lease premium which you have paid, which is known by different names, salami or upfront premium, etc., whatever name it is there, that whether that amount which you have paid, lump sum amount which you have paid, is in nature of an advance rent and therefore it is liable for GST, or it is in nature of an interest created in the land, therefore which is not liable for GST, or it's a one can say one has already sold the land. You know, now if you look at the current scenario, earlier government was selling the land and transferring it to the respective parties in the name Sadbara Avtara or property card, whatever you are using the documents, they were conveying the land. But since I think last 20-25 years, they have started giving the lease property on lease for construction or for whatever purposes it is. And therefore lease is always goes on renewing after the lease expires. In many cases, the lease have expired and they have renewed also, subject to various conditions. The question that comes up is that when you give it on lease for a long term, we can say for 99 years, and then whether the GST is chargeable or not. That's a question which we need to discuss. Now, if you look at why this problem has arisen, is that people have taken a shelter of Income Tax Act, and luckily, in one of the cases, the Tribunal of CSTAT also followed the income tax judgment. In income tax, the dispute was whether the lease premium which is received, is it towards the rent amount, therefore the amount which is received is chargeable to income from house property, or is it a capital receipt? If it's a capital receipt, it's not chargeable to service tax, income tax. And if it's a revenue receipt, it is chargeable to income tax. In this case of Supreme Court, Commissioner of Income Tax versus Pine-Barry Tea Company Limited, this issue was discussed. In the said case, there were two tea states along with machinery and building were leased out for a period of 10 years on payment of premium of 2,25,000 as lease premium. So there was a one amount paid as 2,25,000 and second was annual rent of 54,000. The question which came up is whether the lease premium will be charged at 2,25,000 will be chargeable to tax, income tax in the as income from house property. The Supreme Court noted the difference between the two, that it said that the section therefore brings out the distinction in the price paid for transfer of right, property and rent to be paid periodically to the lessor. When the interest of the lessor is parted with, the premium paid is for, price paid is for premium or salami. I mean, they distinguished it, that we are paying premium for creating an interest in the property and you are paying rent for using of the land at the state, tea estates and the machinery. And they said, what is your paying amount for using of the land or tea estates or machinery, that will be chargeable to GST and income tax, and the premium amount will be considered as capital receipt and will not be chargeable to income tax. This is the issue which was there. That they observed, applying the above principle, Supreme Court observed that lessor had parted with the estate along with the bungalows, building, machinery, etc. for 10 years, and the lessee could enjoy the same. Therefore, there is a transfer of substantive right, interest of the lessor in the state to the lessee, and a conferment of right on the lessee to use the said state by exploiting the same. And then the question of using came. First amount gave him the right to use, and second one, the use of the asset. Now, this principle is sought to be applied in service tax era. And the first judgment we had, I mean, since it was a renting lease premium and not towards a renting amount, what was taxable prior to 1st June 2007, after 1st June 2007, is a renting of real property and not the interest created on this renting on the land. And therefore, when the matter came up before the tribunal in the case of Greater Noida Industrial Development Authority, this is the first case which was discussed on the judgment. And there the tribunal distinguished between the interest creation and renting. See, you are all are aware that prior to July 2012, the tax was on a specific services which were defined under section 65(1)(05). The tax was levied on those only and not on any other services. After 2012 also, the definition of service was given in section 65(b)(44), and it specifically excluded the transfer of immovable property. After July 12. Now in Greater Noida, because the question was prior to 2012, now this is the most important observation which is made, and that lays down the basis for our discussion. A lease is a transaction which has to be supported by consideration. The lease term may be either premium or rent or both. The consideration which is paid periodically is a rent. As regard the premium, now same judgment they have referred. The Apex Court in the case of Commissioner of Income Tax versus Manipur versus so and so has made a distinction between premium and rent, observing that when the interest of lessor is parted with for a price, the price paid is a premium or salami, but the periodical payments for continuous enjoyment are in the nature of rent. The former is a capital income and latter is the revenue income. Kindly note, when this judgment during this relevant period, the dispute was prior to 2012 and the tax was only on renting of immovable property, and therefore the tribunal held. Now it is coming. Thus the premium is the price paid for obtaining the lease of an immovable property, while rent on the other end is the payment made for use and occupation of the immovable property leased out. Since taxing event under section so and so, renting of immovable property, service tax would be leviable only on the element of rent, that is payment made for continuous enjoyment under lease, which are in the nature of rent, irrespective of whether the rent is collected periodically or in advance or in lump sum. Service tax under section 65(1)(05), read with so and so, cannot be charged on the premium or salami paid by the lessee to the lessor for transfer of interest in the property from the lessor to the lessee. And this amount is not for continuous enjoyment for lessee's property. So this is observation is specifically for charging on rent in the context that during relevant period, the tax was only on the renting of real property. And this has continued. As I said, this is prior to 2012, but after 2012 also, the definition excluded the service of definition, transfer of real property, and this is a right in the real property. And therefore, one can argue that it is not chargeable prior to 2012. Now, if you will observe this, it will be evident from the above judgment that tribunal has in the case of relied on the Penbury Supra to hold that lease premium paid is not for creation of interest in the property, and such transfer is not covered under the purview of the defining of rentable property and it's not liable to service tax. This is an issue which is there. However, the tribunal held, and there was a definition, there was a problem in the definition. An amendment has taken place from with effect from 1st July 2010, as against the tax was introduced from 1st June 2007, but they were made an amendment and they introduced a clause 5 of the explanation, which is what it is that they held up to 1st July 2012. Now this, when the tax was upheld after 1st July 2012, the Greater Noida challenged it in the Allahabad High Court. And the Allahabad High Court, the SSC filed appeal before the Allahabad High Court for the judgment reported in Greater Noida for holding the taxes levied from 1st July 2012. The High Court agreed with the view of the tribunal that annual rent payment for such a long-term lease are covered in the definition from 1st July 2012. However, the tribunal made the following observation with respect to inclusion of premium in the value of taxable supply in para 36, which is reproduced below. Let us see what the tribunal has said. We may not enter into a lease premium, lease of the premium paid and fixed should form the total consideration for levy of service tax or not, as has been filed by the department. There's no appeal has been filed by the department against the order of tribunal. See, as we said, the tribunal held that on premium, no service tax is payable, and department has not filed the appeal against that. So High Court observed that, look, we are not entering into that at all because tribunal has held it to so, and there's no appeal from the department. So let us not enter. But for the timing, if the tribunal has held that only rent charge we consider for computation of service tax, it will not mean that tribunal has held that as a part of the same transaction was taxable and not part of it not taxable. The argument was that the part of the transaction was taxable because amount received is a premium and amount is a rent. Rent is taxable, premium is not taxable. But he says, in our opinion, the tribunal has rightly held that lease of open land for use as a commercial business purpose as a taxable event. But what amount is to be taken into consideration for computation of service tax has been confined to periodical rent only. The plea raised to the contrary to the learned by has been rejected. So, appeal of the Greater Noida for the purpose of setting aside the demand on even on the annual rent which is payable was rejected by High Court. And then the Greater Noida went to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has stayed the judgment of the Greater Noida. Now this is where the issue with regard to service tax lies. But one must understand this is an entire contest is prior to 2012 when the tax was leviable only on the renting of real property. And they held that premium amount is for the creation of interest in the property and not for utilization of the asset, enjoyment of the asset. And therefore they held separate, the tax is not payable in salami. However, we have now, when we go to Bombay High Court, in the case of CIDCO, where you are all located in this thing, refer to the judgment of Greater Noida granting waiver of pre-deposit to the SSC when the tax demand was confirmed on the lease premium charged by the corporation. This is basically in the context of the, at that point of time, when prior to 2014, you are all aware that if the tax demand is confirmed on you, then you have to make the application, file an appeal, along with the application for waiver of pre-deposit and granting stay on the recovery of the amount. I mean, today, if you look at from 2014, there's a change in the section 35F. Today, section 35F says that the tax is, you have to compulsorily deposit 7.5% of the tax amount before the appeal is admitted and appeal is heard. There was no such rule prior to August 2014. Prior to August 2014, everybody had to make an application. If you don't want to pay the amount, you have to make an application for stay and waiver of pre-deposit. So CIDCO has made this application for stay and waiver of pre-deposit, and the tribunal asked them to deposit certain amount. However, the CIDCO went to Bombay High Court against the order of a tribunal, asking them to deposit certain amount. And there, the High Court has observed that lease premium charge of the corporation in the category was confined to the only on the lease premium charge to the lease premium charged by the corporation under the category of renting property. I mean, they have given a waiver of the pre-deposit. Now a question comes up in the further. Different high courts have held differently. Therefore, the entire matter is highly disputed, even for the period prior to 2012. The High Court of Tripura has held that lease premium paid for leased out and is like charging the one-time rent, and the rebate given for a yearly rent to be paid and thus chargeable to service tax. The High Court of Tripura took a contrary view, entirely contrary view than the tribunal has taken in the case of Greater Noida. They held that the lease premium is for the enjoyment of the property. It's in the nature of advance rent, and therefore it is chargeable tax. Kindly note what in income tax that Panbari was only for capital receipt and revenue receipt. Even if the amount is capital receipt, then also it is chargeable to service tax or GST. I mean, the treatment in the account of the amount, whether it's a capital or revenue, is not material. So definitely the judgment of judgment under the Income Tax Act, I don't know, some people are raising hands. The question answer to be taken now, or we have a session? We will take all the question answer in future afterwards. Isn't
Yes,
it?
sir. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let the participant put the question answer in the chat box. We'll answer those. Don't worry. Okay.
One request to all members, kindly put your questions in question answer section. After the session, we will take a question answer session. Thank you, sir.
Sure, we'll take it up. We'll reserve the time for that also. Don't worry. Okay. Now, Tripura High Court held that even premium is chargeable to service tax because it's in the nature of rent. I was mentioning that even if it is considered as capital receipt in the income tax or in the books of account, then also the tax is chargeable. It is not that the moment we consider any receipt as a capital receipt, the tax is not chargeable. So the distinction between capital receipt and the revenue receipt, what is relevant for income tax, is not relevant for the indirect taxes. Therefore, on that ground, you can't get away with the GST or the service tax. However, Tripura High Court has held that there's an observation that even if the premium is in nature of advance rent and therefore liable to tax. It is asked before on behalf of the petitioner that what is taxable as rent and not premium. The same was the observation by the tribunal in the case of Greater Noida. This argument is without any basis whatsoever. What is taxable is a consideration for the transfer. Even a premium is charged, that is like charging the one-time rent, and this rebate is given for yearly rent to be paid. Premium is also part of the lease money, and therefore the entire transaction, both premium and rent, are amenable to service tax and service tax payable. Here there was no judgment referred in this. If you look at the entire judgment, there was no judgment referred showing the distinction like Panbari and other judgment, which we will deal with. Distinction between the capital receipt, what is for creation of interest, the premium is for creation of interest in the property, and rent is for the enjoyment of the property. Such kind of argument is not made before them, and therefore they have observed like this. They have not given any basis and all that. But however, that judgment is there in Tripura High Court. Now we come to the GST part of this. We already have the Navi Mumbai Association Builders judgment. In the case of levy of GST and lease premium was decided by Bombay High Court in the case of Builder Association so. The High Court has considered the judgment of premium in the case of Supreme Court in the case of Panbari. As I said, Panbari case was an income tax. It was only for the purpose of capital and revenue receipt, and therefore court has rightly distinguished that, and therefore we will not deal with that further in that. a transaction of nature, but the income generated or derived from it. The relevant para is 15 Bombay High Court that was referred, that they have observed, which observation we have already dealt with. Now the question comes up, is this sovereign function, which is one of the issue raised. There are two things which now we have to deal with this. And recently the Bangalore Tribunal, as in the case of KID, which we will deal with in detail. One is the eminent domain, principle of eminent domain. And second is whether sovereign or a statutory function by the corporation. These are the two main principles which we'll be discussing for half an hour to explain as to what can be the implication of that. Now, this one was a sovereign or a statutory function. Issue was raised before Bombay High Court also. Now, Bombay High Court, for not charging the GST on the lease premium, the Bombay High Court in para 18 has also considered whether the granting of lease and charging lease premium amounts to discharge of sovereign or statutory function by the corporation, and thus whether it can be said to be beyond the purview of GST. This was the argument made, and Bombay High Court in para 18 is observed. In case of commissioner of this thing, the demand for the issue, the 194 and particular section 65 so and so is relied upon. The service charge collected MIDC from the allotee to the plot are in relation to provided by the MIDC to the plot holder, and the same is covered by the maintenance, management, repair service. Now, Bombay High Court in one of the cases has mentioned that MIDC is providing whatever MIDC allotting is a sovereign function. Actually, MIDC and CIDCO. MIDC is basically for industrial plot, and CIDCO is for residential plot. Actually, the industrial plot, there is already exemption available under serial number 41 of the notification 12 by 2017. Therefore, now MIDC and all doesn't become a big issue, subject to the transfer and all that, which we'll deal little later. But this is what they are observing with regard to that. It is in relation to such a controversy that Honorable Supreme Court judgment in the case of Ramatav Cooperative Housing Society outlining the legal position and status of the corporation is referred by the division bench. The issue related to collection of service charges, but whether the service rendered are taxable service or not. The division noted that this consideration is the amount received for facilities and amenities provided. That's a statutory function. It is in these circumstances the revenues appeal was dismissed by observing all the observations the paragraph relied upon must be seen in the background of essential controversy noted above. It observed that MIDC is putting a sovereign function. That was the main argument which was made. And sovereign function is then not liable for service tax. With respect to it, cannot be said that the activity performed by sovereign or public authority under the provision of law, which are in nature of statutory obligation, are excluded from the purview of the present enactment. So this is what they observed, that the activity performed by sovereign or public authority under the provisions of the law, which are in the nature of statutory obligation, are excluded from the purview of present enactment. They said no. Particularly the dividing line between the government and non-governmental sovereign function, sovereign and legal functions, and otherwise is not very thin, and past post obligation, liberalization and privatization. Post globalization, liberalization and privatization. In that context, a useful reference can be made to judgment of Honorable Supreme Court in Nagappa so and so, which will deal with para 23-24 so and so. So in one judgment, the Bombay High Court held that MIDC is performing a sovereign function, and therefore service charges collected by them, statutory functions, and they are representing the state. Therefore, service charges collected by them is not liable for service tax. Same argument was made for GST also, and this was distinguished by Bombay High Court, which said that post globalization, this is the most liberalization and privatization, the what is sovereign function is required to be very, very understood. And in that context, the observation in the case of Nagendra Rao is very important. Now that is where we will come to that, and then we will come to further back to this. Just give me time. This is the observation of Supreme Court in the case of Nagendra Rao. In the Federated State School Teacher Association of so-and-so, the distinction between sovereign and non-sovereign functions is categorized as regal and non-regal functions. The former was confined to legislative power, the administration of law, and exercise of the judicial power in respect of non-regal functions, which could be assumed by the legislative power, and the state was held as a corporation analogous to private company. So what three functions they have given? Legislative power, the administration of law, this police and all that, and exercise of the judicial power, that is courts and all this. In respect of non-legal function, which could be assumed by legislative power, the state was held as a corporation analogous to private company. So all other powers, except your law and this thing, they said the state is equal to the corporation, like a private company, and therefore they are liable for, I mean, they're as good as private company, and therefore they are not in the nature of sovereign function. Now, further observation. Regal functions are inescapable and alienable. Such are the legislative power, the administration of law, the exercise of judicial power. Non-legal functions may be assumed by means of the legislative power, but when they are assumed, the state acts simply as a huge corporation with its legislation as a charter. Its action under the legislation, so far as it may not legal execution of the law, is merely analogous to that of a private company similarly authorized. So they said like a private company, the state is also acting. They are not carrying out any sovereign function. This decision reflects the modern thinking. The state is treated in performance of its function like a private company, and obviously answerable for negligence of its employee. In the modern sense, the distinction between sovereign and non-sovereign function does not exist. It all depends on nature of power and manner of legislative supremacy under the Constitution arises out of constitutional provision. The legislator is free to legislate on topic and subject out of it. Similarly, the executive is free to implement and administer the law. A law made by legislator may be bad or may be ultra-wise, but since in the exercise of a legislative power, a person affected may challenge its validity, but he cannot approach a court of law for negligence in making the law. It is only trying to, find out, they're observing that what can be the distinction between the sovereign and non-sovereign function. Sovereign function can be one where the state is not answerable. I mean, tomorrow if the military goes and kills some enemy, he cannot be answerable to court that why you killed him. But if the person kills, any citizen kills other citizen, then they are answerable. Then say, nor can the government exercise executive power be sued for its decision on political or policy affair. It is in public interest that for acts performed by the state, either in its legislative or executive capacity, it should not be answerable in tort. That would be illogical and impractical. It would be in a conflict with the even modern notion of the sovereignty. One of the tests to determine if the legislative or executive function is sovereign nature is whether the state is answerable for such action in the court of law. And this is what we have seen. This is the main test which they have laid down for to held it to be a sovereign function. For instance, acts such as defense of the country, raising armed forces and maintaining it, making peace or war, foreign affairs, power to acquire and retain territory, are functions which are indicative of external sovereignty and are political in nature. Therefore, they are not amenable to jurisdiction of the ordinary civil code. No suit under the civil procedure code would be in respect of it. The state is immune from being sued, as the jurisdiction of this code in such matters is impliedly barred. So friends, the observation which was made by Bombay High Court in the para 18, while they decided the sorry. Nagendra Rao. While they decided this petition of the Builder Association of Navi Mumbai, that the MIDC is not carrying out the sovereign function. Same is the logic applied for CIDCO also. And they have referred to para 23 and 24 of the Nagendra Rao. Nagendra Rao, as we read out to you, that they made a distinction. And in case of allotment of land and on to the builders or any person, it is not in the nature of sovereign they held. The states can be held to be responsible in a sense that if you have allotted the land for a purpose, suppose in your BP plan, development plan, you have reserved the plot for an X purpose and the land is allotted for Y purpose by the corporation can be held responsible that why you're negligent in not knowing the purpose. So therefore they held that the MIDC is not, CIDCO is not doing a sovereign function, and hence they are chargeable to service tax. Further, the Bombay High Court para 20 relied upon the judgment of Allahabad High Court, holding it was right in arriving at conclusion that was a taxable service. An appeal has been filed before Supreme Court of the Builder of Navi Mumbai, which is pending for disposal. That you all are aware of this thing. I will not dwell upon this thing. Now, a next question comes up. So, what my conclusion here is that whether it's a sovereign function or not, CIDCO, which is carrying out, no doubt it's carrying out statutory function. It is created under statute and it is created under therefore, whatever the statute provides that they have been carrying out the function on statutory basis. And that is understood. But that does not mean that it's a sovereign function. All statutory function is not sovereign function. We have already seen what is a sovereign function. But therefore, it's very doubtful whether the Supreme Court will uphold the non-taxability on the ground that CIDCO is carrying out the sovereign function, which was one of the arguments which was made at the time in Bombay High Court. Now, recently, the Bangalore Bench of Tribunal has set aside the demand of huge demand for Karnataka Industrial Development Corporation by upholding another principle called eminent domain. Now, this principle was first discussed in the case of Bamal Lorry and Company Limited. The eminent domain briefly means that these corporations which are created by the various state authorities or local authorities are basically to carry out the functions which otherwise state will carry out. I mean, they're as good as if you lift a corporate well, they are nothing but a state government. And that the state, once they're a state government, then they are also carrying out the same function which the state will carry out, and there's not separate. And therefore, I mean, there was an earlier principle that king can do no wrong. And therefore, what functions are being carried out of the state also is not liable for any taxation, because the state has to collect the tax, central has to collect the tax. The same person is doing a service, you collect the tax from the same person. And therefore, this principle was first enumerated in the case of Bamal Lorry. Now, this is what they observed in the Supreme Court in this. Every governmental function need not be sovereign. State activities are multifarious. Therefore, a scheme or a project sponsoring trading activity may well be among the state essential functions, which contribute towards its welfare activity aimed at the benefit of its subject. And such activity can also be undertaken by private persons, corporation, and company. Thus, considering the wide ramifications, sovereign function should be restricted to those functions which are primarily inalienable, which can be performed by the state alone. Such function may include legislative function, the same thing with the pardon. Therefore, mere dealing in the subject by the state or the monopoly of the state in a particular field would not render an enterprise sovereign in nature. This is what they just repeated. Further, I mean, this is what they observed in the further, what corporation, what government companies can be considered as a part of the state, that they are nothing, they are representing a state. I mean, they laid down certain principle, and which equally applies to CIDCO also, that CIDCO in the based on these criteria will be considered as nothing but an extension of the state. In order to determine whether authority is amenable to writ jurisdiction except in the case of habeas corpus or quid pro quo, it must be examined whether company corporation is an instrumentality or an agency of the state, and the same carries on business for the benefit of the public, where the entire share capital of the company is held by the government. These are the criteria which is they laid down, where the entire share capital of the company is held by the government, whether its administration in the hands of a board of directors appointed by the government, and even if the board of directors has been appointed by the government, whether it's completely free from governmental control, the discharge of function, whether the company enjoys monopoly status, and whether these exist within the company deep and persuasive state control. So these are the factors which they have laid down, that if a corporation is having these factors, then it is nothing but an extension of the state government. The other factors that may be considered are whether the functions carried out by the company corporation is closely related to governmental function, or whether department of government has been transferred to the company corporation. And the question in each case would be whether, in the light of the cumulative facts established, the company is financially, functionally, and administratively under the control of the government. And this is what they have held. I mean, we have no doubt that if one goes to the CIDCO's this thing, it will be definitely the extension of the state. The last sentence, the control should not therefore be mere regulatory, but it should be effectively there. In all the cases, the government acquires the land and then transfer to CIDCO and all that. That is a part of factual position. And therefore, if you lay down these criteria, then CIDCO will be held to be extension of the state. Now, how does that help in taxability in this? Then this is a further observation this thing is made. In order to determine whether the appellant company is an authority under Article 12 of the Constitution, we have considered factors like formation of the appellant company, its objective, function, management control, the financial and received by it, its functional control and administrative control, the extent of its domination of the government, and also whether the control of the government or its merely regulatory and so and so. So this is again they held. Now, these principles that you are part of the state government have been applied by the Bangalore bench of tribunal in the case of Karnataka Industrial Development Board to held that whatever lease, long-term lease which they have given by the this Karnataka Industrial Area Board is not liable for service tax in as much as that they are only carrying out the functions of the state. And they are nothing but the state. And this is what they observed, that KIADB is a state undertaking and a creature of a statute to exercise the power, and thus the said board is a limb of an agent of the state government. And this we already dealt with. The issue whether functions carried out by MIDC can be considered sovereign function is decided by tribunal in the case of so and so. Although they observed it that we find that it's statutory function, and these all observations are for the demand prior to 2012. And therefore, there was a circular, the statutory function and that. Today, there is all judgment, and this will not help in the context of GST. And of course, This was also the department filed up in Bombay High Court, and the Bombay High Court relied upon the judgment of Para 10 in the case of Ramotao Cooperative Housing Society. And this already we have discussed in that in the MIDC and Nagendra Rao, how the Bombay High Court has distinguished these judgment while upholding the levy of GST on the ground of this Ramotao and state sovereign functions. They are distinguished with Nagendra Rao's observation. The Bombay High Court in SC judgment is observed as follows. The Apex Court held that the corporation discharges sovereign function, and these are the MIDC observation. But in case of Greater Noida, Builder Association of Navi Mumbai, already they have distinguished these judgments. Now we come to the whether the CIDCO is carrying out a business or not. I will definitely deal with the eminent domain functions also, but before that, let me deal with one or two more points. The definition of business. You see, we always argue that the corporation, which is an extension of state government, as I mentioned, that state government, if the CIDCO is held to be extension of state government, then state government is not in the business. They are more in the administrative control, regulation, and all that. But however, the definition of business given, and you know that as per the definition of supply, any supply has to be in the course or furtherance of business. So unless you are carrying out a business, you cannot held to be chargeable to GST. So that's what the definition of business. If you look at as given section 217, they have in clause I, where is categorically stated an activity or transaction undertaken by central government, state government, or local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities. So when you are carrying out the functions for a public, then you are engaged as a public authority, and therefore you will be held to be carrying out a business. Unless, of course, you prove that's my sovereign function. Like the court has held, tribunal has held, which has been affirmed by Supreme Court, that police department is carrying out the function of law and order, which is sovereign function, which cannot be carried out by anybody else. I mean, no private company, even if you employ private agency, like there is a distinction between private agency and the police department. Police department also provides securities to some of the individuals, some of the meetings which are held, and sometimes society also calls because of the AGM and all that. Private agencies also do the security business. But if anything happens that any theft takes place or any dispute takes place, even private agency has to call the police department for the purpose of filing a case or for the purpose of making a case in the court and etc. etc. Therefore, there's a difference between security agency and police. Police carries out the law and order situation, which cannot be delegated to any private companies. And therefore, their sovereign function, that is held to be so by tribunal and is upheld by Supreme Court. In the case of government, they have specifically included that is a business they are carrying out. So CIDCO is carrying out a business as they are doing a private corporation. Now a question comes up in this. Eminent domain is the power of sovereign to acquire property of any person for public use without the necessity of his consent. This is the most important. That even if you don't want, and I want to acquire the property for my industrial development, I can. I mean, you may not be willing to sell this property. You day in and day out, you see that farmers and all protest for the purpose of highways and others, that we have not been given the proper compensation for the property acquired by them. So, but the state has a domain. State has a power to take that. An eminent domain is the power of a sovereign to acquire the property of any public use without necessity of consent. Payment of just compensation to the owner of the land which is acquired as a part of exercise of his power. Eminent domain power is regarded as inherent power of the state to take private property for public purpose. The only dispute which you can raise is the compensation amount. I mean, there should be fair. Then the Supreme Court in the case of Perappa Hanmanta versus so-and-so decided the matter whether the state government of Karnataka and exercise power of eminent domain under section 28 of the KIDC Act, the case in Kerala industrial area had acquired the land. And Supreme Court made the following observation. And this is what they said, that it has taken the possession. Thus, the acquisition of land in favor of the KIADB is evidently clear from preliminary and final notification issued by the state government. And therefore, following the procedure under section so and so, it took possession of the acquired land from the owner who were in possession of the same and was transferred in favor of the KIADB for its disposal for the purpose for which land were acquired as provided under so and so. So this is what the eminent domain means. I mean, they took the land and they transferred to KIADB. And therefore, the combined reading of the judgment in the case of so and so is evident corporation fall within the definition of state and carry out the function of the state domain. I mean, which will, as I said, CIDCO also will carry out the function. Now a question comes up whether KIADB is carrying out the statutory function, sovereign function or not. We have already seen Bombay High Court has held that MIDC is not carrying out a sovereign function, and therefore, I mean, not eminent domain was not discussed therein, but statutory and sovereign function is not carried out. But however, Bangalore tribunal in the recent cases has held it. That's a statutory function, and they have said it's a part of a eminent domain. And this is most relevant observation. A careful reading of the aforesaid provision of KID Act and KIDB regulation would clearly go to show that appellant is a state undertaking and creature of a statute to exercise the power of eminent domain. The appellant is engaged in discharging statutory function with the act of legislator, that is KID Act. It's a statutory body performing statutory function, exercising statutory power. Once carrying out the objective, then it cannot be said treated as a service provider under the Finance Act 1994. Further, we find there is no service provider-client relationship so as to warrant the levy of service tax under the provision of Finance Act so and so. Appellants undertaken various activities and functions in the state of Karnataka as per the direction of the state government given from time to time under the provision of the Act, and hence their activity cannot be considered as taxable and no service tax can be levied on this. This is the most recent judgment of tribunal. They have gone on the principle of state government, that is the eminent domain, and they have held that KIDB is carrying out the function which the state was carrying out, and therefore it is not liable for service tax. These are all the judgments in Finance Act 1994, and that, I mean, rightly the pressure should apply to the GST also, because same situation there. But department, of course, will approach the Supreme Court for even eminent domain also, principle of eminent domain, and let us see how the Supreme Court finally deals with it. This we already dealt with in the case of Nagendra Rao. Now, this is one of the judgment where the court has observed that Haryana State Industrial Development Corporation is carrying out the sovereign function. The functions of the appellant is a sovereign function. It is in any event as a state within the meaning of Article 12 of so and so. Its action therefore must be fair and reasonable so as to subvert. I mean, this is a one observation without discussing, like in Nagendra Rao, what is sovereign function and what is the modern thinking and what is the globalization, liberalization, privatization, which is what in Nagendra Rao they have discussed. But however, in case of Haryana State Industrial Development Corporation, they have held it to be sovereign function and not liable for service tax. So what we can say in conclusion is, as regards the long-term lease, two things emerges: whether granting of lease by CIDCO is a sovereign function. The Bombay High Court has held it to be otherwise. Karnataka, in case of Karnataka, tribunal has held it's an eminent domain, and once you carry out the functions which the state government is carrying out, you are not liable for, you are not making a supply of service. and the Haryana State Industrial Development Corporation, it is held to be sovereign function. The entire matter is now before the Supreme Court. Whether it will be held to be sovereign function or it will held to be that it is carrying out a function of eminent domain, the matter will have to be decided by Supreme Court. Until then, we can all refer to these judgments, but in my opinion, final conclusion is very difficult to arrive at. And that's why I made in the beginning that when one looks at such a plethora of judgment and high courts and all this taking a different views, then naturally you have to commercially protect yourself in the case of when the cost is built up, when you are making a cost of the construction of the house and etc., building, etc. I mean, you cannot just say that based on my KIDB judgment or my judgment of Haryana State Industrial Development Corporation, the tax is not payable on a long-term lease. That's my suggestion to you. And therefore, very difficult to say what Supreme Court will decide. There are judgments for and against in all these cases. Now we come to the other issues. Very often these MIDC and the lease land taken from the MIDC is retransferred to the, so MIDC has given to X person has for 99 years, X person has used for 25 years, and for whatever reason, he has now sold his land to somebody else. He is unable to run the factory, whatever the reason may be. Somebody else, then the lease for 30 years is still remaining, more than 30 years is still remaining. And that is the, whether on such reassignment of lease, the exemption is available. That's a question, whether the amount which you pay to MIDC or similar organizations for the obtaining transfer of it, or amount you pay to the first assigner, whether it will be liable for tax. This issue has been discussed in the case of this judgment is there. Now, when the MIDC gives the consent for retransfer of the lease right to the new purchaser, the question that arises, what is the effect of that? Whether it's a transaction between the first assigner to the new assignee, or it's a transaction between the MIDC and the assignee, new assignee. And that is what the court has observed, Supreme Court has observed, that when the consent is given by the industrial development corporations for reassignment, it is the nature of, there is a new contract entered between the industrial development corporation and the new person. Once the industrial development IDCs start collecting the rent from the new assignee, then it is as good as a contract has been entered into between the new assignee and the industrial development corporation. And therefore, it is our view that one can therefore claim the exemption under serial number 41 of the exemption notification. Of course, as I said, in your all the GST, there are various disputed propositions, which we will have to wait till finally decided by Supreme Court. And even if Supreme Court decides, the department, the legislator is free to retrospectively amend it. We already seen concept of mutuality. Supreme Court has decided in the case of Calcutta Club, and the legislator has amended the section 7 retrospectively with effect from 1st July 2017 in order to levy tax on the all cooperative societies and other all these persons. So one cannot be sure whether, in spite of the success in this court, the legislator may not retrospectively amend the petition. But that's it. Now we come to the anti-profiteering. Jayant Upadhyay sir has already made the reference of anti-profiting. Nowadays, it is seen it's a fashion that every disgruntled buyer threatens the builder that unless you do this, I will go to the anti-profiting. And that is how the issue starts. I mean, they go on asking for so many. We have seen, we are advising so many builders. The demands by the buyer are made, and one of the buyer will go to the anti-profiting authorities. And there is a how it starts. And these observation, these provisions are known to you. How the issue starts is, as per the procedure, the person has to make a complaint to the screening committee, state screening committee. And normally what we have seen is they make a preliminary inquiry. What we have seen is that most of the builders in this, when a letter comes from the screening authority, they hardly reply. They don't just reply for these things. And therefore, the matter gets referred to the Director General of Anti-Profiting Authority for investigation. I mean, if you make a attempt, I'm not saying that the screening authority will take a very liberal view and may not forward the cases to the DGAP, but you can at least make an attempt and try to satisfy the authority that I have not received any either the reduction in the rate or in the reduction in the increase in the credit. You can make an attempt and try to see whether your case is not referred to DGAP. Once it is referred to DGAP, friends, I must tell you, whatever has been passed by the orders have been passed by the National Anti-Profiting Authority. All the orders have gone to Delhi High Court, and respective courts have. Every builder is the jurisdiction to file writ petition is where the property is located. So if you are constructing the property in Chennai, you'll have to file the writ petition in Chennai High Court. If you are constructing Bangalore, it's Karnataka High Court. Like this, it goes on. But Supreme Court, what they did, everybody challenged the constitutional validity, no procedure being laid down, etc., is there, and therefore, what Supreme Court has said, all these issues first let it be decided by the Delhi High Court, and entire petitions have been now merged with the Delhi High Court, and Delhi High Court is going to hear this every time the date is given. And first the bench was constituted, and the part heard was made, then the new bench was constituted, and now the matter is again going to be heard in August, I'm told. Pending that, whatever will happen that let it be. There are two grievances. One is that in the taxing statute, there is no provision, like in the Essential Commodities Act, to take away the anti-profiting authority, anti-profiting. There is no power under the Article 265 or any other article when you're levying a tax that you can claim back the anti-profit. It's in there in the Essential Commodities Act. Second is that the anti-profiting authorities has not made any rules and regulations. And what is the manner to determine the anti-profiting, that you made the profit? They just go on. I should not say that, but on their whims and fancies. They have not understood the real estate industry at all. And in the case of other other product, where there is a straightaway one-to-one correlation, if you look at our tax structure, initially when the July 17 the tax was made, many of the items were covered in 28, and they were brought down to 18 in somewhere in November 17 or October 17. Now with the result, so many items which was there the tax got reduced. Where manufacturer, when he sells the product, he can definitely levy a lower rate of tax from the date when the tax rate is reduced. But what about the tax, the product which is already in the pipeline. It is with the distributor, it is with the retailers. I mean, he is required to charge lower rate, but whether he'll charge without MRP, with lesser MRP, these all question had come up, and whether when he is charged without MRP, again there's a dispute. Now, suppose MRP is 100, you are charged 90, you show him the bill of 90. Whether the 10 rupees which is given by you is a business discount, commercial discount, or it is towards a lesser tax which is paid by you. I mean, unless you have shown that Section 171 benefit passed on, the authorities are not agreed to that. And that is why it is said, that is why one of the contention is that you are not given the manner of passing of the discount. You merely said reduction in the price. The reduction in the price can be on account of various factors. I mean, there is a slum in your demand, like today, Corona, the slum is a demand. You have made a sale, and you say, no, I passed on the reduction in the rate of tax. But they say no. So unless the rules are made properly, what way the credit note to be done, what way the credit note wording should be there. We have been arguing before the authorities that, look, you can't implement this thing. Now, as regards the real estate industry, what they do is they are comparing the credit available with you prior to GST. They have taken 15 months period. I mean, the GST, as you know, came from July 17. So they take a base from April 16 to June 17, 15 months period. Take your credit, and then that credit gets divided with the turnover. And you arrive at a ratio. So you are arriving at a ratio with the credit, what the credit was available to you. And then they are comparing that credit with the credit in the post GST. Now here, if you look at this, 1.1 and 7.2. Now you see the variation. In this case, for the 1617.74, for the it is April 17 to June 17, it is 14.92% is the credit. And I'll explain why this all happened. 1.1 is on a totality basis, whereas 7.2 on the totality basis is the credit available, and therefore the conclusion is 6.1% is the excess credit which you have got, which you should pass on. This is how they are working out the GST. Now, various questions that comes up is A. First and foremost, when you take a cutoff period, in this case, you have taken June 17 and February 18. Credit is available to you, no doubt, as and when you incur the expenditure. But the turnover is not dependent on you. Now, if suppose somebody has paid the advance here, somebody comes to you and says, sir, it is 1 crore rupees I am paying in advance. You will include in a taxable turnover. But corresponding expense is not made by you, because you got the expenses, the advance amount. Very often, when you launch a project, 10% or 20% is paid, 15% is paid, but you may not have incurred that much expenses. In case of post GST, you can raise a demand on the buyer when you achieve a particular milestone. So as per your agreement, suppose the milestone is casting of 5th slab, and he has taken up to February 18. In your casting of 5th slab is actually performed in the case of June 18. So whatever your demand has not come, because you can raise a demand only when the slab is casted, but the expenditure incurred by you is you have availed the credit. So when you take a ratio, what happens is the turnover is not reflected here, but the credit comes in the picture. So a ratio jumps up. This is what we have been explaining and is one of the factors. We say, sir, synchronization of credit with the milestone payment is not possible when you take up a truncated period. If you take up any product, any period, the question will, either you take a period up to which the demands have been raised, where the milestone has been achieved. And if you don't take up that period, then there will be a problem, because sometimes my credit will be there, but there is no corresponding demand. With the result, my percentage of credit goes up. Now, friends, this was very vehemently argued with this. Yeah, I hope you have understood the reasons. They are comparing the same with the other product. In case of other product, what happens is I receive the product and I immediately take a credit. I sell the same product. Either it will be in a stock or I will sell it out. But here, the credit synchronization is there, in that credit is available and sale is there. But here, my sale may not be there, but credit may be there. And therefore, in the case of builders, this is causing a major problem whenever the issue is taken up for argument. Unfortunately, what happened in the first builder whom they asked for an anti-profiteering, he deposited certain amount of 5 crore, another amount. He agreed with that calculation and deposited this. He did not argue so many details. And therefore, that has led to a precedent. Now, wherever you go, he says, why don't you pay on this thing? We have been arguing that, look, you can't calculate like this. Second is, now increase in the tax rate of input services. You are aware that after 17, the price has not gone up, but tax rate has gone up. Earlier service tax was 15%, now 18%. So your contractor, this thing will charge you 18% tax. So naturally your amount of service credit will go up. And hence the percentage also will go up. Now there is to be when your cost is increased, unless your corresponding increase in the revenue is there. Initially when GST was introduced, there was a tremendous increase in the price of cement and the steel. So if your price of cement and steel has increased, correspondingly your credit will also be increased. But there is no corresponding increase in the revenue because the rate has not increased. And therefore, now these are the factors. In individual cases, each factors have to be evaluated and arrive at a conclusion whether what has led to this higher profit. As I said, the real estate industry is on a totally different footing. Then you cannot determine the anti-profiteering in the manner in which you are determining for other product, other goods. And unfortunately, they are doing the same thing. And therefore, you find that in case of every builder, the orders are passed against him. And everybody is challenged that in the respective High Court. Just 2 years before, the High Court was granting the stay totally. But now they have started asking for, Delhi High Court has started asking for payment, some amount of deposits also. Otherwise, the stay has been granted. And as I said, the entire matter is before the Delhi High Court to decide constitutional validity and the manner of determining the profit. Notwithstanding that, I must tell you that when you pass on the benefit, please do not word it as a discount. And please calculate the manner in which I have suggested and pass on exactly the same percentage. What we have seen, the many builders have passed on the discount. Now, suppose this percentage comes to 6.1%. Many have passed on 6. They have said, very liberal, 6.5. Now, when you argue before the authorities, they say 6.5 kyun diya aapne? When you're working in 6.1, that means 6.5 you're given, and that is an additional, that is a commercial discount and not a benefit passed on. The credit note also do not say very clearly there is a discount. In many cases, we have seen discount they have given. They have not said benefit passed on to section 171. And even if we have passed on this benefit, the authorities have said, no, this is a commercial discount and you pass on another benefit. Now, this is where the entire problem comes up. If you are passing on any discount, make a calculation like we suggested and pass on the exact discount. If you want to pass on 7% or 8% in our example, then pass on 6.1% as a benefit passed into section 171 and 1.9% as a other discount. I mean, do not pass on 8% as a benefit passed on. Otherwise, they will not agree to that. I mean, the authorities have taken such a very rigid view on the matter, and I mean, they have been confirming, trying to confirm. But the fact that there are no rules, regulations, and this thing will definitely come, and all the matters I am sure will be transferred back to the authorities after the Delhi High Court has heard it and given the judgment, unless everybody, all builders will approach the Supreme Court in this era. And unless you lay down a mechanism of determining the anti-profit ring, I think there will be an issue. Friends, with this, I think I will end my discussion. And now we can take up the question answer session. As I said in the beginning, that whatever question answer is there for, we can spend some time and do that. Over to Sanjay.
Thank you very much, Gupta sir. It was very lucid and in a very simple language, you explained this toughest chapter of GST with relation to builders. Anti-profiteering is very much difficult for builders to understand, and there are n number of cases and issues involved. And you very simply and very easy language, you try to explain that. Sir, there are several questions on question and answer session. We will take up those one by one.
Yeah, sure.
First question, or I think this is a suggestion or request from Rashmi Lonikar ma'am. She wanted to understand again about the Tripura case. I think she missed out some part of it. So can you re-explain it for a better understanding?
Yeah. See, as I explained, in the case of Greater Noida, the argument was made based on the judgment of income tax and Panbury that the premium amount which is paid, that is salami or lease premium which is paid, is for creation of interest in the property, and the rent amount is paid for the purpose of continuation utilization of the property. So tribunal held that renting is a taxable service prior to 2012 and not the creation of interest in the property. So you can only charge the tax only on the rent amount and not the premium amount. That was the tribunal held in this thing. But when it came to Tripura High Court, this Panbury and all were not referred before Tripura High Court. So Tripura High Court has just held that premium is nothing but an advance rent. And therefore they said it is liable to tax. The fact that after Greater Noida tribunal judgment, the department did not go to High Court. High Court has observed that the department has not approached us. That means department accepted that the lease premium which is paid for the creation of an interest is not chargeable to tax, and this all will apply prior to July 17. Let me tell you this, because there was as I said, prior to July 12, there was a tax was on a specific services, whereas after July 12 to 17, the tax was on the services, but services specifically excluded transfer of immovable property, rights in immovable property, and therefore this is right is an immovable property. You know, as per the General Clauses Act, immovable property include benefit in the land and the rights arising in the land. And therefore the Tripura High Court, because it was not argued before them that Panbury and all that was not referred, therefore they observed like this what we have given in this slide. I think it's clear now.
Sanjay, you can go for the next question.
Sir, my signal is quite low. I'm taking next
Okay.
question. Next question is from our very senior member, Rahul Gokhale, sir. What's the GST applicability on transfer premium charged on transfer of leasehold asset, such as MIDC land in following two cases? One, transfer premium charged by MIDC. Second, premium charged by seller of land.
See, this is what I explained. There is an exemption under serial number 41 of the notification 12 by 2017 that talks of upfront premium for the paid to the paid for the purpose of transfer of lease for more than 30 years. Now, when MIDC is transferred to say A initially for 99 years, and A has utilized that for a period of 30 years, and now it wants for 69 years to be transferred to B. As per the MIDC regulation, MIDC has to give a consent. Otherwise, B cannot take it. The B becomes a consent, and consent only with consent only B will take it. Now the question that arises, why do you need the consent of MIDC? And what is the legal effect of the consent given by the MIDC? That's a question. That in our judgment, in our slide which I quoted, they have elaborated that the consent means that the MIDC and the new person, in our example B, has entered into a contract for getting the lease for a balance period of 69 years. The consent means that once the MIDC starts collecting the rent from a B, it means the contract has been entered into between B and MIDC, and there is no contract between A and B. See, A cannot enforce any terms of the contract because MIDC is going to provide a service, MIDC is going to treat the clean and administrative charges, and all this MIDC will levy, and that will be payable by B. A gets out of the picture. And therefore, we are suggesting, in our opinion, it is possible to argue that MIDC has given a lease for a 69 years to B, and hence they will be entitled to exemption under 41. That is our argument. As I said, these are all propositions which will have to be fought tooth and nail with the department, and one has to do it. But our problem comes up is MIDC do not agree. Without the consent of the without payment of GST, and the seller also plays very safe. He says, I don't want to have any risk. I will pay GST. If you want to apply a refund, you apply for a refund. I mean, that's the situation we are in. But since the credit is not available, it is advisable that if your seller does not agree, then you apply for a refund, because you are the final consumer of it, and you are going to use it, you are not avail the credit. So therefore, unjust enrichment also doesn't apply to you. Therefore, you should apply with it. In our opinion, you have a good case to contest on that.
Thank you, sir. You rightly and simply explained that. I think Rahul sir must have satisfied with your answer. Third question is from our also a senior member, Vidyadhar Patil sir. In case residential property is developed on plot, sir, can you are getting me properly, sir? My voice is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I have little problem here with network. I'll repeat the question, sir. In case residential property is developed on plot allotted from CIDCO under highest bidding scheme on long-term lease for 60 years, what is tax liability under GST in this case? Said property is not sold, not allotted to any outsider till OC. If yes, how to calculate whether answer will be different if it is used for self-occupation by developer after OC?
See, the long-term lease for the when given by GIDC, we have already dealt with it. That CIDCO is not carrying out the statutory function, sovereign function as held by Bombay High Court. And I mean, one has to, now everything is with Supreme Court, whether eminent domain and the sovereign function will be upheld by them. Otherwise, the tax will be payable irrespective whether you apply this or not. After OC or before OC on this.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So next question is from CA Santosh Dumar. Sir, whether MCA 21 ROC is sovereign function of a government or a corporate function?
MCA is a part of the MCA is not a corporate. MCA is definitely not a corporate, and it's a registration. What is MCA is giving you is a registering the document. It is not giving any license. So registration is anyway exempt from the payment of service tax. GST
Right,
also.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So one more question from our senior member. If GST is Rahul Gokhale, sir, if GST is held to be applicable on transfer premium or assignment payments in case of MIDC land, then whether input credit will be available?
See, one can contest, if you look at these referring to section 17(5)(c) and D in this thing, and there the word used is used for construction. Now, there are a lot of judgment which suggests that, availability of credit is the backbone of implementing GST. Whenever we say we talk of a VAT system, giving of a credit is a backbone of the VAT system, because unless the continuous credit is given to you, you cannot implement GST at all or any VAT system. Therefore, the exclusion clause has to be read. What is excluded from the availability of credit has to be read strictly. And once you take it used for construction, then you can argue that what is used for construction is only the direct material, the cement, steel, and other thing for item for construction, not the land which is otherwise there. It is there. Use word has to be strictly interpreted. Now, all these things will have to be argued out. We do not know. Now we are in 5th year of the GST, but no tribunal has been set up. We are all dealing with the joint commissioner level, which knowledge we no need to argue and all those things. Only when judicial members start listening to our arguments that you can expect some premium. But of course, you have a case to contest for availment of credit. See, all this one has to understand what are we trying to lose if we contest, because commercially also you have to protect. If you do not take a credit, your credit is gone. The matter is over. You can't do anything. It's a loss to you, right? If you take a credit and contest, what happens is you are incurring 18% interest. Certainly, in order to protect yourself from penalty, you can upfront write to the department that, look, this is the view I have and I am taking a credit, and utilize the credit. I mean, if you don't utilize the credit, you are not no interest, but then there's no financial benefit available to you. If you utilize the credit, you are willing to take a 18% interest risk. And if you are willing to take that risk, then you can contest. And if you feel, no, I don't want to take any risk, then you better don't take a credit and do it. And these are all issues which we cannot know because of the fact that we do not have a decided judgment on all these things. And these words are not used internationally also in so many Australia or UK or Canada and all those things, where we can definitely take this view. Therefore, the companies who are willing to take 18% interest risk is only can take and contest these issues.
Very appropriate piece of suggestion, sir. Very professional advice, sir. We'll move on to the next question. Next question is from, name is not there. Nowadays, public enterprises like GAIL started asking a CS certificate from the service provider. Say like a service provider in laying gas pipeline work, stating the rate quoted are in compliance with the anti-profiteering. Whether GAIL has the right to ask such certificate as a separate body is constituted to check the anti-profiteering. CA German Varghese is asking this question.
Yeah, you see, let me tell you, anti-profiteering itself is held is that if you have started a construction, a builder and in 17 and somebody has purchased after July 17, then the anti-profiteering law does not apply to him at all. Because then he has purchased it by knowing the law very well. Those who have purchased it prior to 17 and are making a payment subsequent to 17, that he was not aware your negotiation has taken place prior to that and after that and all that. So therefore, anti-profit law applies on that. Today, if GAIL is asking a certificate, there is no point. You can give a certificate because they have been told internally by this thing that you ensure that the anti-profiteering laws have been complied with. So if you are quoting a tender and all that thing, and you go on questioning his authority, is a different matter. But he'll say, I am rejecting your tender because of this. And there's no point. And one can very well straight away give you the answer that, yes, I have complied with the anti-profiting authority. There's nothing.
Gupta sir, I think we can conclude that any work which got started after 1st July 2017 in GST era, for that anti-profiteering should not apply, isn't it? We are comparing the credit available in earlier regime and now.
Yes, I agree. Unless these rates have reduced, like I gave the example of 28 to 18%. In those cases, it may apply. Otherwise, you are perfectly right. Otherwise, I agree with you.
Sir, this was only an intermediary arrangement for some time because later on the competition will, decide what is the rate to be charged. But I think government is going on some other way where ease of doing business is getting disturbed so much.
Shetty Sahab, I agree with you because I said the National Anti-Profit Authority has not made the rules. Therefore, they're going left, right, and center.
Understood.
That's a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chairman, sir, we have 3 more questions. Can we go ahead with it? Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, Sanjay, you can take.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we have time now. We can take.
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'll take up the next question. If the long lease has been revised, the original was in 2016, revision in 2021, with increase in premium, what will be the stand?
No, I have not understood. 16, you are there. 16, have you paid the tax or not? I mean, the person can write in this thing. You may, because that time the GST was not there. But the exemption on service tax was available in 16 also, right? And on 21, in 21 also, if the same SSC is there, same person, then he will get the revision, he'll get the upfront amount has been revised. So he will get the exemption under now 41 of 2000, and serial number 41 and notification 12 of 2017. There's no problem.
Okay. So next question is from CS Santosh Dhumal. Sir, in case of MIDC, example, the amount received by Mr. A for transferring 69 years unused lease period, whether same is taxable in the hands of A?
No, that's why I said, no, it is not taxable. But normally our experience is that A do not agree to that. Because A feel the liability will come on me. Why should I do all this thing? So A always tells B, sir, you please reimburse me the tax and I will pay, you claim a refund. No, if you are so sure, you claim a refund of that. That is a practical thing. See, and that is how everybody plays safe in the matter. He says, I am getting out of this business. I don't want to do the continue. You are here in the business. You will run the factory. You will do this thing. So you make an application and do it. That is how he does it. We, of course, for getting a refund, we will have to substantiate that A is not liable. Otherwise, I can't get a refund. But law, section 54 provides me the power to make an application for refund. Subject to, of course, A giving me a document of payment and all that. These documents will have to be. That's not a problem.
Right, sir. The next question is in relation to the first question only with the ROC issue. You already clarified, but he has some different view. Can we take up that issue, sir? Sir, my question of ROC was in the context of payment of return filing fees, share capital registration charges, etc. They are still exempt from RCM of GST?
Yeah. That's why I said, no, there's an exemption. See, for RCM, there should be a tax first. Then there can be a RCM. Yeah. If the tax itself is exempt, then there is no question of tax. There is a specific entry for giving a registration. The license is not taxable. License is taxable. But here, ROC is not giving you any license. It's only registering a company. or registering the documents.
Right, right. So we have completed our question also. So this was very pleasant journey till now, and the last session also was a brilliant session. Every session since last 5 days we are taking, we are watching all the senior faculties here. Every day we enjoyed every bit of it. So today was also not an exception. We were waiting you for since last 3-4 years to hear you, sir, personally here. And now that event has occurred, and we are very much pleased to have you here, sir. So this is all from me, and on the behalf of our branch, I'll request our immediate past chairman, Santosh Sharma, sir, to extend a hearty word of thanks to you. Santosh, sir.
Yeah, Sanjay, thank you so much. First of all, good evening to all of you. And since last around 15 years or more than 15 years, I am reading the book of S.S. Gupta sir, earlier on service tax and now on GST. So we are very much, happy, and we are very much privileged today that we got the opportunity to hear you on these two very complex topics, which I feel that these two topics are complex, related to lease premium and related to anti-profiteering. Even when I have signed a certificate on anti-profiteering, I was very much confused. One of my client has asked for this certificate at the time of filing of tender. Then it was a really difficult task for me to calculate this, how to calculate, how to go ahead, but somehow we did it. So really, we are very much thankful and privileged to hear you, sir. And I expect all of you to give a big round of applause to today's speaker, CA S.S. Gupta, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, sir, since last 5 days, our branch has taken this lead on this special provisions related to builders, developers, and real estate sector, and impact of GST on this sector. And very successfully, we are proud to say you that more than around 150 or 200 or sometimes 300 members have joined, and they have heard these sessions. And my special thanks on behalf of Navi Mumbai branch to CA Sanjay Nikam. First of all, the way he has organized it, the way he has lined up the speakers from WIRC and from senior speakers fraternity, it is really a matter of great, applaud for all of us and privilege for all of us. Sanjay, you have done really very fantastic job, and there is a good future for you. I hope so. So that's all I can say. I will also thank to all the past chairmen who have participated and given their time and valuable suggestions for this type of webinars. However, we used to love this seminar concept, and we enjoy a lot. We used to have good food, good,
That's what we are missing.
good interaction, because Navi Mumbai is love to share have a good kind of bonding among ourselves and with lots of speakers, but we are missing it. Hope so that things should be normalized soon, and we can again, enjoy our fellowship and our learnings together. With this brief vote of thanks, I would like to, conclude this session with the permission of Chairman Sanjay Bhujbal, sir.